Oh, hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Connected With. I'm Ted Cohen, your genial host. It's been a bit of a crazy week. Not much happening in digital and media this week on the deal side. There have been some interesting, small deals. But the bad news was the passing of Charlie Watts, the drummer for the Rolling Stones, as you know. I was lucky enough to meet Charlie back in 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio, when the Rolling Stones did their first U.S. television appearance on the Mike Douglas show out of Cleveland before they went to do the Ed Sullivan show. Mick was not the friendliest person in the world then. I met him years later, and he said, "Nice to meet you." I said, "No, we met years ago when I was 14 years old." And he went, "How was I?" And I said, "Not real friendly." So anyway, what we're going to do is jump right into our guest here in a moment. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro here. Mark Fisher, who I've known, I think, for about 15 years at least now, is the head of the OTT organization, which he'll explain in more depth, and he'll get it more correctly than I'm getting it. But we talk about dealing with transformation, dealing with evolution in media, dealing with change. I can't think of anybody, and that includes my dear friend Gary Shapiro at CES, who has had to deal with more change than Mark Fisher has. Mark worked in the video software business at the beginning. He'll explain what he did, but the business of home entertainment, primarily video, which is what Mark deals with, has changed dramatically over the last 30 to 40 years. And Mark has been at the forefront of that, dealing with that change, both in the trenches and then for the last few years as head of trade organizations that deal with the distribution of visual media. So before I screw it up anymore, because I'm nervous, because Mark's a great guy. He's been wonderful to me. I've ended up speaking at a bunch of their events over the years, and I don't want to get all his information wrong. It's my pleasure to bring Mark Fisher on stage here.
Hey, Ted.
Did I mess that up too badly?
No, you did very well, very well.
Okay, so let's start out with, do a little bit of history. How you, okay, let's start with this. I always ask everybody, you're graduating high school, you're going to go into college, you're going to get a job. What did you end up doing that ultimately disappointed your parents? Were they expecting you to be a doctor, a lawyer, go into the family business? And
take it way away from there. I was going to be a rabbi, believe it or not.
I believe it. You've been my rabbi for years.
That early on. That was my goal. Then I got hooked on the challenges of math and calculus and geometry and all of that stuff. And fun thing was, I lived in upstate New York, and
where'd you grow up?
Troy, New York, just outside of Albany. So the cool thing was that was about a half hour from Saratoga. Great racetrack. What better way to practice math and statistics than playing the horses? So at 18 years old, I started applying my math to play horses. Mm-hmm. Started losing at that point my interest in becoming a rabbi, and wanted to figure out ways that I could apply math, and just found business to eventually be that route.
So did you spend a lot of time at SPAC?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What was the Saratoga Performing Arts Center?
Correct.
It was a great venue up there. What was your first concert up there?
First concert that I saw at Saratoga, I believe, was Chicago. I want to say it was Chicago. It might have even been actually Chicago Transit Authority.
Okay, so then I got the year around 1970.
Yep.
Very cool. And from there, you migrated too. You left Troy.
Left Troy. I was a grocer. Out of college. I became a store manager for a grocery chain. Back initially A&P, if you remember them, the
Totally.
Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company.
Tea Company, yes.
Yeah. And moved from there to Stop and Shop in New England, and eventually moved around New England and up to Boston. And I was running the non-foods departments for the chain for a period of time, for a few years. This was early. I was in my late 20s at that point. And got a call one day. They said, there's this new thing that supermarkets are starting to get involved in, and it's video. It's video rental. And I was always and everybody there knew I was always a hobbyist. I always had the largest TV of any of my friends or people I worked with. And yeah, I can remember back way earlier than that, when you couldn't connect speakers to a TV, hooking up speakers with alligator clips to the back of a TV speaker. So I was always into this. And so in 1980, I got a call and said, we're starting this video thing, or we want to start this video thing. Can you want to move up to Boston and help us get it started and run it? And that's where it all started.
So you got to Boston in 1980.
Yep.
Cool. It would help, I think, viewers, listeners, to give a little background on the history of how home video got off the ground. Magnetic, it's a magnetic video, etc. Because it wasn't a slam dunk. The studios were actually nervous about it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, back in the earliest days, first the studios actually started, and I believe it was MGM or Fox that initially started with the first round of videotapes available for sale to the consumer. Right. And I mean, they were being sold in the $100 range, and there was a catalog of maybe 50 titles. And
that was Andre Blay.
That was Andre Blay. And soon later, there was a creative retailer in the electronics business that said, look, people aren't going to buy these movies and store them. He had, for many years, he had been bringing projectors into people's homes and renting them projectors and movies. Right. He said, if they're going to rent projectors and movies, they'll rent VHS tapes. Right. So he started renting the tapes. Well, a whole lot of concern from the studios about losing control of their content and losing revenue, losing long-term revenue from their content. And I'll cut the story short. And studios eventually, the studios sued to prevent the ability to rent VHS tapes unless they gave permission, and therefore by giving permission meant that they would charge a lot more for a VHS copy that was rentable than one that the consumer would buy. Right. So they attempted to challenge what is the first sale doctrine of copyright law, right? Which says that once you buy a copyrighted work, a physical copy of a copyrighted work, you can rent it, you can gift it, you can throw it away, you can lend it, you can do everything except publicly perform it or copy it. And that went through the courts, and first sale doctrine was upheld, and it was actually long-term. It was the best loss that the studios ever had.
Exactly.
Because,
now, I remember I was at Warner Records at the time. Mort Fink was running Warner Home Video, and he came up with the Rube Goldberg thing of parallel inventory. There was a rental inventory and a physical for sale and a for sale inventory. And I remember he very ceremoniously announced to the industry, if this doesn't work, I'll quit my job. I can't remember if he quit or he was let go, but that the idea of having two different SKUs, one for rental and one for sale, was again, and in parallel, the Betamax case on home taping went through.
Correct.
And again, that turned out to be not so bad for everybody.
Absolutely. So those early days were challenging, but we've come a long way since then. I mean, the early days of VHS, I remember before I got into the business, owning an old VHS player and a big front projection TV, and going to Photomat and lining up in my car at Photomat to see the selection of maybe 15 movies that they had available for rent and renting movies there. I mean, they were, back in the early days, Photomat was the rental source for movies. And then eventually companies like Errol's in DC got into the business and opened up a great chain in the DC area. And the business just flourished from there.
So you left A&P and went where? What was your next career?
Stop and Shop.
Stop and Shop. Wow.
Yeah.
And eventually, did you go into video retail directly, or was that? So
I was a store manager at Stop and Shop for 2 or 3 years, then moved from there into, that was back in the day that superstores, where grocery stores became half general merchandise and half food. Right. Back when that was just emerging.
And this is still in Boston?
This was, we had stores. So Stop and Shop had stores through New England, Boston, Connecticut, Rhode Island, a little bit in New Hampshire.
I was a Star Market person when I lived in Boston.
That's right. Now, what years were you in Boston?
I was in Boston 74 to 78. I was there. I moved right after the huge snowstorm. The storm of the century that still supposedly has never been. Every year you'll see there's a storm in Boston and they'll go, this is the one that may top the 78 storm. It's never happened. But there was a Star Market down the street in Newton on Ave. And I had to take a sled and pull a sled to Star Market, put groceries on it, and pull the sled back home because you couldn't drive a car.
Was that the unique store that sat on top of the freeway?
No, this was the one further down in Newton. I know the one you're talking about is amazing. But, I started renting videos around that time. I knew the people at Advent, and they had just come up with the big screen TV with the video beam. And I was showing movies at home. People would come over and I would, and there was also a little underground network of movies, which again was addressed by commercial availability. So in every, there's there's a Harvard professor named Deborah Spar. She wrote a book called Ruling the Waves. And she said in every sociological or technological upheaval, there's a period of unrest, and then business rules come into play. And what seemed like Wild West and we'll never figure this out, everybody figures it out.
Yeah.
And it settles in, and studios making movies available pretty much killed the bootleg market at that point till we got up to online and, copying and whatever. So when did you come into contact with VSDA, and what was VSDA?
So it's interesting. When I moved up to Boston and started looking into the home video business and how to open up a division within Stop and Shop for home video, I didn't know anything about the business at all. I knew it from a consumer standpoint, but I didn't know where to buy tapes from. I didn't know what the various business models were. I didn't know how to get a POS system. I didn't know where to shelving. I didn't know where to start. So I reached out to the trade association and started going to local meetings of what was then VSDA, the Video Software Dealers Association. And it was a national association, but it had a very lively local chapter in Boston, and Lechmere was involved in it, and many of the local indie 1-store, 2-store, 3-store retailers. And
Strawberries?
I'm sorry, Strawberry. Oh, for sure. Strawberries was a member. And I started going to meetings and I started talking to people, and I learned so much from people who were willing to share with somebody who's going to be a competitor in a marketplace how to do business. And if not for being part of that trade association back then, I never would have gotten up to speed nearly as quickly as I did. Right. So that's when I first found the trade association, started the business. We ramped up to about 65 stores. 60 of them were inside the grocery stores, and 5 of them were freestanding Blockbuster style stores that were adjacent to the grocery stores. Right. And at some point in time, I was invited to not only be a member, I'd been a member of the association, but join the local board of directors. I got very involved and served as the treasurer and then vice president of the local board. Worked with people you might know, Wayne Mogel and Frank Luca, and a number of the folks up in that market. And in the early 90s, was asked to join the national board of directors, and joined the national board of directors and spent a few years there, and served on its executive committee as the treasurer for a couple of years as well, and so served as an active member for a long time. Then as my career changed and I evolved, and I moved from Stop and Shop to West Coast Entertainment, headquartered down in Philadelphia, West Coast, where I met our friend Steve Apple. And when I joined, soon after I joined West Coast, I realized I wasn't going to be staying there very long. And there was a change in management at VSDA, and my predecessor in my current role, Bo Anderson, took the helm and asked me if I wanted to move to LA and come in as his number 2. And I thought about it for about 30 seconds and said, okay, I'm in Philadelphia. It snows here. I could be in LA where it doesn't snow.
What year was this?
This was 99.
Okay.
So 99, I moved to LA.
I had a flashback this week. I have to drop an anecdote in. There's somebody who watches every week and sends me a criticism of how many anecdotes I drop in with every guest. But I'll drop this one. The only VSDA that I attended was in Dallas. And that year, I think it was Polygram Home Video at the time. I think Polygram was actually a brand.
Yeah,
it was. They had the actor who played Candyman at the thing, and you had your picture taken with the Candyman, which was one of the scariest movies ever. It was like, having your picture taken with Freddy Krueger. And the new Candyman is coming out this weekend.
Yep.
And when I heard about it, I had this flashback to the Dallas VSDA where I had my picture taken with Candyman and with about 20 other characters from animated movies and whatever. That was the big deal, was to get a Polaroid with, your favorite Spider-Man or whatever. So you got here in 99, just in time for people to discover that it was just as much fun to try and copy movies as it was to copy music.
This is true. Piracy has always been an issue.
I've been, I worked for Napster. I worked with Napster and LimeWire, in both cases trying to take them legal. But piracy, again, an upheaval, whether it's the pandemic right now, whether it's whatever, things accelerate change that might not have happened on its own. And so while piracy was not good for the business in general, it did accelerate the adoption of, well, maybe we can stream movies. Maybe people can download them legally. Maybe, it provided the impetus. How do you feel from the trade association side of it? How do you feel about, outside forces, accelerating business progress?
Oh, Ted, you're so right. I mean, there's always what I have called the piracy window for content. There had always been, up until very recently, there had always been that window between the time a movie was in the theater and the time it was available on home video. And the only way that a consumer could access that movie in the home was through piracy.
Right.
And I think there were two forces that have really accelerated change in that regard, and that's both piracy, as you mentioned, and the pandemic. because now there is hardly a what we call a piracy window. Content's available in the theaters. In many cases, it's available simultaneously for streaming, either as part of a subscription service or as part of premium VOD or video on demand.
Right.
And certainly the pandemic accelerated use of that.
So I'm going to take all the provocative positions and not put you in any awkward position. But 10 years ago, we had a conversation. Like I figure we've known each other probably at least 15 years. We had a conversation about the Tower Heist experiment. Mm-hmm. When Universal Pictures on Thanksgiving weekend, either 2010 or 2011, was going to make Tower Heist available for $50 or $60 for home streaming at the same time it opened that weekend in the theaters. And the theater owners said that if, at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, if Universal went ahead with that plan, they weren't going to show the movies in the theater. NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, were going to boycott the film. And besides, it was a stupid idea. And they had me up to the line, besides, it's a stupid idea. Because if it really was a stupid idea, then hire Ernst & Young or Price Waterhouse as an outside auditor, do the experiment, and publish the results. How many people would have done it at the time? Instead, the studios blinked, and the idea was shelved. And then, people like Sean Parker have come along, the guy from Facebook and Spotify, about, creating day and date release, and it's been rejected. And then we had this horrible, worldwide pandemic thing, which not thing. I mean, it was horrible. It's a crisis. I mean, I've lost a lot of friends, but all of a sudden the studios went, we've got to make these films available. And they started making them available first only for streaming, because most of the theaters, like the Regal around the corner from me, closed down, was shut down for months, and then day and date. And again, this is one of these things of we'll never do this. And yet Black Widow, which I think you could speak to positively, had a great opening weekend, both at home through Disney Plus and in the theaters with $80 million in box office. So we've been able to show that in not maybe all cases, but in a lot of cases, these things can coexist. So with that long premise, how do you think of where we are right now with parallel VOD, SVOD? And let's go through, first of all, I'm going to back up a little bit, and forgive me, everybody. Everyone who knows me knows what this is like. Your membership over the years. I mean, when you were talking about VSDA, it was mom and pops, and then Blockbuster and West Coast Video and Target and Best Buy and whatever. Then as we moved to, and Tower Warehouse, and Sam Goody's all go away. And then Blockbuster goes. Your membership has evolved. I don't want to go through the whole, but you have nimble. I believe nimbly, and I say this with all respect. You have been able to balance your left foot and your right foot to look toward the future and still serve your current membership. Your current. I'm blanking on the word.
Membership.
Membership. But I mean, I remember, again, going back 10 years ago, the membership was a combination of Target and Best Buy and Walmart and an emerging Netflix and an emerging Google. And now, what percentage of your membership is online?
100%.
It's 100. So
100%.
So the Targets and the Best Buys and the Walmart are no longer involved.
No.
Not even through Vudu or any of their online initiatives.
Actually, Vudu is no longer associated with Walmart. They're wholly owned by Fandango. So
okay.
No, Ted. I don't like using the word pivot because we've eventually.
I say evolve.
Right. We've eventually made some pivots. Eventually, but they were slow pivots. It really was more evolution. I mean, look, it started out, as you said, with thousands and thousands of mom and pop store members.
Right.
It was a very different association. I mean, you talked about the Dallas VSDA show. That was a huge convention. We had thousands of members. Evolved from there to the large chains, the Blockbusters and Hollywood Videos and West Coast Entertainments and movie galleries, and the sell-through companies like Strawberries and Sam Goody, and then eventually Best Buy and Walmart and Target were some of our strongest members and all on our board of directors. And it was probably 13 years ago that we first started looking at some of our members like Netflix, who was a member for their disc rental business.
Right.
And Amazon, who was a member for their online sales business. As they were starting to get into the digital business, we first started following our members there. Then we started reaching out, and our first member who was a solely digital member was Cinema Now. Kurt Marvis and Bruce Eisen.
Right.
And Kurt and then eventually Bruce both served on our board of directors. And we started at that point expanding our support for the digital space and cutting back our support for the physical space. Look, in the physical space, there was a lot of need early on for bringing people together to collaborate, to get to know each other, to meet and create relationships and deals, and then eventually to work on standardizing things like the physical supply chain for the DVD.
Right.
Those problems were long solved. There was much less need for a trade association in the physical space, but in the digital space, it was truly the Wild West, and there was so much need for collaboration and pulling people together, and that's what a trade association does. I mean, back when we first moved toward the digital space and Cinema Now joined, we had Amazon and Netflix and others. So, and Best Buy was involved in the space at that point as well. I remember first going out to all of the studios who were starting to support digital and to the digital retailers. And what do you want from a trade association? What are your pain points? Where can we help? And I had never heard the term, again, this is going back a lot of years ago. I had never even heard the term metadata. I had no idea that was going to be the biggest pain point that these companies had. And we eventually made our mark early on in the digital video space by working on standards and specs for distribution, and metadata was where it all started. The current standard for avails notifications in the digital video space are EMA avails, and EMA is, I missed a step in here, but we transitioned from the VSDA into EMA at around that point.
So I remember, again, and I'll give a shout out to in parallel, a good friend of mine who I liked a lot better than the guy he worked for, and I'll say that. Bill Wilson was over at NARM stressing the importance of metadata for music at the same time that you were, he's got a thing, he had a t-shirt that said "got metadata" instead of "got milk." I remember going, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, though. There was a woman who spoke at one of at the CES breakfast that you hold every year, that she looked like the woman in the lab downstairs in NCIS. She was like a metadata ninja. She was physically imposing. She literally, I think she had spike boots on. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
Might have been Alex at Fox.
I didn't know if she was from Google or from. She was either.
Oh, yes, she was from Google. I know exactly who you're talking about now.
And she was metadata as a warrior. I mean, she was and she got across to everybody how important it was to get those details before you do anything else. And it's proven to be true. Because in the physical world we used to deal with was that track on the original album? Was that track on a best of? Was that track on a KTEL record, a compilation? And the compensation models around the different uses of that track, of that song, the monetization might be totally different if you're doing it from the greatest hits album that was renegotiated at a different rate. So you had to know not only what the asset was, but what was the source of that, which version of that asset. And you guys have done an incredibly deep dive into, what video is. For a moment here, why don't we sort of take a break in the narrative? Because we all get criticized sometimes, mostly me though, I'm throwing it on you, for talking in code. Can you go through what the current offer, what is AVOD, SVOD, VOD,
Sure. The alphabet soup of our business.
Yes.
So let's start with the basic OTT.
Right.
So OTT is over the top. And what it refers to is the distribution of content into the home over on top of the traditional cable distribution. So basically through the internet, or now through 5G.
Right.
As you'll be talking about next week, and I'm sure we'll be getting into that. So that's OTT. Then the forms of OTT start with, probably the first out there was TVOD, transactional video on demand. And that's exemplified by Vudu or Google Play or the Apple Store or Amazon Prime, where the consumer will go on and either rent or buy a movie. They'll rent it for a period of time or buy it and own it in either a downloaded library or a library in the cloud. That's TVOD. SVOD, subscription video on demand, would be, the premiere would be Netflix.
Right.
And I had Warner Plus now and Disney Plus, or I'm sorry, HBO Max and Disney Plus, and all of the pluses to that. And that's where the consumer pays a monthly fee, and they can stream all they want of the content that's available from that source during that month.
Right.
So you've got TVOD, you've got SVOD, then you've got AVOD, and that's ad-based video on demand. And this is the primarily free, sometimes just very inexpensive video on demand, such as Crackle Plus, for example, and a variety of others. Amazon Prime.
Is Pluto on demand, or Pluto is just?
Pluto has some on demand, but I'll get into Pluto in a second.
Okay.
That's in the one last that I have to describe.
That's why I'm asking.
There's one more after AVOD. But it would be some of the content that's available from Zumo or from Tubi would be AVOD as well. The last, and that's all on, again, all of that content, TVOD, SVOD, and AVOD, is all content that's available on demand. You want to watch a piece of content, you go online and you stream it on your schedule. The last is FAST, and that's free ad-supported television. And that's linear content that is distributed primarily ad-based, so it's free ad-supported television. And it gives the consumer that laid-back experience that they had with television. You turn on Pluto, you see a grid of channels. You turn to one of those channels, and it just plays whatever is on at that time is playing. Half hour later or an hour later, another show comes on. And if you turn on Pluto and go to the I'll make up a channel, the Three's Company channel, and I go to Pluto and turn on the Three's Company channel, we're both going to be watching the same episode at the same time.
Right, which gets us back in. That's one thing that we've lost, is the whole water cooler thing of watching a show the night before it to say, even if if the episode of Game of Thrones came up on Sunday night, the chance that we're all watching it at exactly the same time, possibly not. It's interesting. Pluto just hit $1 billion in revenue last year, which was pretty amazing. Acquired by Viacom. You touched on something that is interesting. We have lost in the on-demand world. We lost a lot of the lean back experience.
Mhm.
The fast gives us that lean back experience of, I don't want to push buttons. I don't want to do anything. Just entertain me. So, I mean, all these things can live harmoniously. It doesn't have to be about, I want what I want when I want it. It's, I just want to be entertained.
Well, Ted, when you say live harmoniously, one of the things you opened up a little bit ago, and then we changed tracks, but you were talking about movies in the theater versus movies at home, and the threat of one to the other. And I just to go back to that for a second, remember the days that television was a challenge to the movies.
Right.
Okay. Remember the days that cable was a threat to the movies. There have been all of these imagined threats. The fact is that the consumer of entertainment loves entertainment, and the biggest consumers of entertainment support all forms of distribution. And they've all got to be a little bit different. The theatrical experience has got to be different from the at-home experience, but that same consumer that's watching a day-and-date movie at home,
right,
is going to go to the theater to watch maybe even that same movie for a very different experience.
It's funny you say that, because we made it, first world problems. We have a 14-foot projector. There's literally 15 speakers in the living room. You've been, it's over the top. I mean, forget OTT. It's the equipment is over the top, different over the top. We made the decision. We have Disney Plus. Did we want to go see Black Widow in a theater, or did we want to have a bunch of friends over and watch it on a Friday night?
Mm-hmm.
I decided, because I like the Marvel movies and I like watching them over a few times to see, wait a minute, was that transition right? Is that character, wasn't that character? There's all the little, afterward. We spent the $30 and did the additional buy.
Mm-hmm.
I am challenged by the fact, and this is my personal opinion, and I don't expect you as the head of a trade association to comment. You can go, I hear you, next topic. But it was interesting that for Black Widow and for Cruella, I paid the additional charge. For Quiet Place 2, it was made available by Paramount Plus as part of my service, and that Suicide Squad and Reminiscence, the new Hugh Jackman that came out last weekend, was available on HBO Max as a part of the package. And the idea of charging people for a package and then charging them a premium on top of the package, I guess when you are Disney, you can do that. And let's go to the next topic. Let's talk about
Ted, leave it to say it's still the Wild West. There are still business models being built, tested, and tried. And shame on companies if they don't try different business models and see what works out best.
Exactly. And the other night, on the other hand, we went to see Free Guy the other night with Ryan Reynolds. We decided there's a neighborhood theater over in Highland Park that is literally they've cut it up into 3 theaters, but it's an old time theater that they divided up into 3, smaller theaters. Nice people, privately owned. This probably won't come up on the screen, but they said, did I want to have a theater freaking membership card? They handed me one at the window. It was good to go to the theater and see the movie. And with all the visual, with all the, game effects in the movie, because you're in a video game. That's the plot of the movie. I wanted to see it in the theater, not see it at home. So it does coexist. But another discussion we had, and then I want to jump to the main topic. A few years ago was we live across the road from Universal City Walk. And it takes 10 minutes to get there, door to door. I mean, walking, it takes 15 to walk down the hill and up the other side and catch my breath. There were movies. I said, I like Adam Sandler. I wouldn't go across the freeway anymore to go see an Adam Sandler movie. I'd pay to watch an Adam Sandler movie at home and have some friends over And the Adam Sandler fans can watch the movie in the home theater, and the non-fans can hang out in the kitchen and drink and talk about how dumb we are for watching Adam Sandler. I think about 2 months later, Adam Sandler announced his Netflix deal, which I felt validated. You know, there are certain things that work for home. There's certain things that you want to have that theater experience. The other thing we talked about, I do want to touch on this too for a moment, was part of the Wild West, I believe, was solved when one of the studios, and you corrected me, we don't have to say which one, combined the digital P&L with the physical good P&L at the time, so that physical and digital weren't competing against each other for rev. But when it was put under one umbrella, I think things, maybe, I don't know if the word flourished is correct, but it made it a lot easier to to evolve and transform.
Yeah, it became less internally political and more about the real numbers.
Right. So let's talk about the conference in 2 weeks.
Yes.
You're doing an event. You're doing one of the first live in person, not hybrid. No, even though you have access to AVOD, SVOD, TVOD, whatever, it's going to be real people present in the space. Talk about it for a couple of minutes.
Most definitely. So in 2019, we held our first, what we called Ottx Conference. Right. And it's all about every form of OTTX. It's about all of those acronyms, TVOD, SVOD, AVOD, FAST.
Right.
And companies, both content companies and distributors and networks and channels and platforms and digital retailers and all of the service and tech companies that support them, all coming together for a conference to talk about the challenges and opportunities in that space. 2019 was the first time we did it at the Universal Hilton, right up the road from where you were just talking about at City Walk. And we had in our first year out of the box, we had 350 attendees. We were all excited about doing it the following year, expanding it to the Skirball Cultural Center in 2020, and figured with probably near double attendance, and then COVID. And we changed our strategy for a year to doing all online virtual events, including that what became our summit. This year, we are back in person live on September 1st and 2nd at the Skirball. It's going to be safe. We moved. Initially, we had all of the halls at the Skirball booked, and we've transitioned from being inside the halls to outside. We're doing the conference program outside. We have breakouts in various locations outside. We have even one-on-one business meetings in pipe and drape booths outside. Our cocktail parties outside as would have been anyway. So we have we also have a vax requirement, either vax or 72-hour proof of not having COVID. We've got a great program. We have over 80 speakers now. It's 2 days of conference programming and workshops, and we have one great session coming up on the technology and 5G and where we're going. And I think, Ted, you've agreed to moderate that session.
And it's funny because we talk about it takes a village and we have friends and whatever. And you know, you've been a friend for years. Steve Apple, I've known literally since 1974, who works with you. There's a gentleman named Phil Lelyveld, who I think you know.
Sure.
Phil runs the USC Immersive Media Lab, but he used to be at Disney. He was I met him when he was one of the tech heads at Disney. And when you asked me to put together a 5G panel, I wrote to Phil and I said, who's the best 5G people you know? And he gave me two names. One, Steve Canepa, I've been friends with for about 20 years. And the other was Pam Allison, who I didn't know, but I knew who she was. I wrote to both of them. They both agreed to do the panel. Pam is at Verizon. Steve is at IBM Consulting. The day after we confirmed both of them, IBM and Verizon announced a partnership on 5G. None of us knew that this was happening, but serendipitously and just through the village that we have, we ended up with probably the two best people to talk about what's happening. That's going to be good. I do. Who else is? I mean, you have a lot of really great speakers. Who
Look,
else?
I attend the keynote on next Wednesday morning is going to be a moderated discussion between Laura Martin of Needham and Associates and Michael Pachter of Wedbush. There are two of the foremost analysts and prognosticators in our industry. They've never been on stage together. And Eric Opeka, the chief strategy officer of Cinedigm, is going to be moderating the discussion. I am really excited about that one. I think it's going to be great. But we have panelists.
Now it's not going to be available online, right? I mean, you're not streaming it anywhere.
So look, we have a hybrid strategy, but that hybrid strategy isn't hybrid events. Our hybrid strategy at this point in time is that we're going to do some events online and we're going to do some events in person.
But are you recording this one? Are you recording it?
We'll record it. It'll be available. Most of the sessions will be available on demand at a later date.
Okay.
Not immediately, but at a later date. We're not streaming it. We're not trying to do anything interactive during the session. We want to concentrate on the in-person experience at this event.
Okay. No, the event looks fantastic. One of the things
Ted, before you cut me off, I do want to add one thing.
Okay, I'm not going to.
That is that we gave you a code, and it's Cohen, COHEN.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody who is viewing this wants to register for the event, that using the code COHEN will get $100 off registration.
Okay, that's fantastic.
So, want to make sure to get that in there.
Look, I've been attending. I mean, I like participating, but I've also attended when my mouth isn't going. You know, they're great events. I have to tell you, watching the evolution of this organization has been fantastic. You've also got Eric Hansen, who came over from Microsoft. With the brain trust that you have now, looking at it through this whole evolution transition, not pivoting, but just, you know, how this is done. There's always a tendency at each inflection point that, okay, we've solved everything and we've thought of everything that can be done. What do you see on the horizon, or what's being discussed in hush whispers that you can possibly share about, you know, we never tried doing X?
There are a couple of things that right now are sort of at the forefront for us. One is, we talked about the supply chain for the early days of the digital business, the transactional business. Mm-hmm. There is no standardized supply chain for the AVOD or even SVOD, but not really for the SVOD space either, or for the fast space. So that's an area that we see there really being need for, and that's not only for efficiencies and cost savings, but when you start doing things like standardizing metadata, it increases search and discovery, and therefore for the consumer enjoyment of entertainment. That's one. Another area that we're looking into now, and I'm really personally really interested in, I guess that you might be too, and that's the live streaming of entertainment. And during the pandemic, that was a big deal. Well, one of the sessions that we have coming up on Thursday next week is going to include Jim McCarthy, who runs the founder and president of Stellar, who's one of those companies. He was also the founder of Gold Star and still runs both companies.
Stellar is a division of Gold Star.
I think they run two separate companies, but he's the president and founder of both.
Right.
I think they run independently. Right. But anyway, he's done some amazing things with live streaming. For example, the Geffen was live streaming through him. They had a show of a magician that they only took, I believe, 24 people for each show. It was interactive. Everybody was on screen with the magician. It sold out every night for months. And
Well,
on the last night, they opened it up, and everybody wasn't interactive and alive. They opened it up, and it crashed the system. I mean, it's been they've done some remarkable things, and so he's going to be on the panel, as well as a good friend of mine, Brad Rowan, who runs Feinstein's at Vitello's here in Studio City.
right.
And they're live streaming pretty near all of their shows right now from live audience.
Right. And what I find interesting, and this is one thing that I've been rallying about for the past couple months, as it looked like we were coming out of the pandemic. Now we're diving into Act 3. But during that moment that we thought maybe people were getting smart and getting vaccinated, that the idea that live streaming was just triage till everything got well again. And I don't think so. I think that if you've Feinstein's at Vitello's, for those of you who are in other parts of the world, is a club in Studio City that's a sort of a cabaret that Michael Feinstein curates, and every once in a while Michael shows up, if I'm correct. And
That's
Billy
right.
Vera is there from time
Regularly.
to time, Billy and the Beat or whatever. And if you have Michael Feinstein appearing in a 100-seat club, I'd pay $30 to watch him on. I would watch the Sex Pistols and I would watch Michael Feinstein. I have a wide talent thing. The idea that it's an either or, that we go away from streaming and go back to only live events. First of all, there's missed revenue. There's missed audience engagement. You're creating, somebody might go to Feinstein's on Vitello's online, watch Billy, and then when they're coming to LA 3 months from now, go to the venue that they would have never known about if they hadn't been part of that virtual audience. So I think this idea that streaming was just a fix for the moment, the cat's out. I mean, the cat's out of the bag, all that stuff. You have a board meeting.
I do.
In
10 minutes.
In 10 minutes, I'm going to set you free one more time. Where do people, what is your other prognostication for the future? And then what's the address for the conference and that wonderful discount code? I can't remember what it was.
All right. Prognostication for the future is we are all going to get back to real life again.
Okay.
And that's going to be through entertainment and through everything.
And will there be a Kentucky Derby party?
There will be a Kentucky Derby party next year, finally in May again.
Okay.
2 years in a row, been doing it for years. 2 years in a row, had to cancel. Anyway.
One of my favorite events of the year.
Look forward to your being with us, you and Maggie. www.ottxsummit.org. Get information about the summit there and use code Cohen, COHEN, for $100 discount.
All right.
Ted,
Mark,
thanks so much.
very much. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay. I'm waiting for Claire Alexander. If she's watching today, will write me a summary of how many times I interrupted, which I appreciate. I got to tell you, watching this organization grow over the years, Mark's great people. Steve Apple first met in Philadelphia when he ran marketing for Electric Factory Concerts. The business evolves, the people evolve, and it's great to have a community of friends that can help you out. My next guest in 2 weeks from today, on September 8th, I can announce, is going to be David Spiro. David ran the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as executive director. David, over the years, has managed Joe Walsh, has managed got Cat Stevens to come out of retirement and start basically to play the piano and sing again. He currently is managing John Fogerty. He's managing Paul Rogers from Free and Bad Company. But we met in second grade. And he knew that I loved music, and I knew that he loved music. And he's gone on to be one of the people that keeps the glue together. Ringo Starr will call him for advice. People will call him for advice all the time. He agreed yesterday to be on the show. It's going to be great. If you have any ideas of people you'd like to see on this podcast, please send me an email at ted at mediatech.ventures. So TED at mediatech.ventures. And send me some suggestions, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, let me know. I've really been enjoying this. Everybody involved in putting this together, John Cesaro and Christy White and Megan Botha, and I'm blanking on my engineer today, but he can pop in and say hello. You want to pop in and say hello to everybody? And then I'll know who it is. And Jeremiah. It takes a village to put this together. It's going to get, Brad. Hi, Brad.
Hey, yeah, Brad with Platinum TDM.
Right. Brad and Jeremiah have been doing a great job helping us produce the show the last few weeks. It's getting better. There's actually going to be an opening and a close in a few weeks. We're actually going to have an opening, credits and music, etc. It's going to be fun. But I'm going to end a couple of minutes early today because otherwise I'll start telling stories that you've all heard before. Have a great week. Think about Charlie Watts when you get a moment and all the joy he's brought us. And enjoy your day, enjoy your week, and things are going to get better. I'll see you in 2 weeks on September 8th. Bye-bye.